What is up, everybody? Welcome to Off the Record. I'm your host, RJ Starspeak, here with my co-host Celia Ryan and our great special guest, Corey Heim, who finally we get on the show after last week. We had a wild week, all of us, as far as the hurricane and travel and wondering where we were going to be and if it was going to be pouring rain and wind gusts and stuff like that. But here we are finally, thankfully, recording the show. Corey, first of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Doing good, doing good. So glad to have you on. Obviously, we were just talking about Talladega. You just had this recent weekend. You said beautiful weather in Talladega, which is it's what we usually expect sometimes, but this week it was a little different, like we mentioned, with the weather. So how was Talladega weekend for you? Kind of recap that.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to be down there. It's such a big spectacle in racing, just Talladega in itself, and to be down there with all those fans and have the beautiful weather like we talked about. It's pretty special for sure. As for the race, we had a really good run going. Our goal is to win the Owners Championship this year, and we were, I think 20 or so points below the cut line at the time, going into the race. My goal was to get stage points and, hopefully win the race so we advance. But, we got a little less stage points than we wanted. So we were kind of going for the win at the end. And, Talladega kind of goes one way or another sometimes. You either seem to finish up front or you're completely destroyed. And unfortunately, we got the bad end of the stick there and we ended up destroyed. But, that's part of it. That's kind of what you expect at a Talladega. And, hopefully we do better next time.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned going for the Owners Championship, and that's something that, was talked about a lot in the Cup Series now with all the swaps of drivers and things like that. But that's something that's been going on in like trucks and Xfinity for a while, with trucks that run multiple, drivers in the car throughout the season. So for you, obviously you're in the truck, trying to gain experience for yourself, progressing yourself as a driver, but that's obviously on your and the team's mind, right? Progressing, getting as much owners points as you can, because it's, it's a big deal at the end of the year where you place.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Owners Championship's really big. I think it's kind of like the unsung points battle in most series. You look at the Truck Series and especially ARCA, I'd say, is like the two where Owners Championships are more commonly, talked about than maybe Xfinity and Cup, because, Xfinity and Cup, you have more common full-time drivers in those series where you don't really see the Owners Championship cars kind of compete for the championship when it's all said and done. Generally your top four drivers championship cars are also your Owners Championship cars. But it seems like every year in the Truck Series, there's at least one truck that's in the final four and in the owners and not in the drivers. So it's definitely a little bit more common to have that happen. And hopefully, if we have a good run at Homestead, we can be that truck this year. I think us in the 17 are the only two trucks that aren't in the drivers championship and that are going for, and that's two really good trucks that I would expect to run well at Homestead. So I'm excited to see what that entails.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned that at Talladega, you kind of reached a point where it's like, didn't get enough stage points. Like, I have to go for the win now. Do you like, and your team kind of go into Talladega, like at one point, I'm just going to race really hard for it. Whatever happens, happens. Like, do you guys kind of go in with that mentality, or is it something that works through as the race progresses?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we can control, we're going to try to control, right? And I mean, at Talladega, you're going to find yourself not being able to control much. I mean, most of the wrecks are going to be caused by the 39 other trucks. Of course, you can cause a wreck by yourself, but at the end of the day, like, anything can happen at Talladega and Daytona and I guess Atlanta now. So you do go in with the mentality that, your expectation is not going to get out of there with a clean truck and run fifth, but, you're going to try your best to do so. And our strategy was to race really hard in the first two stages, which we did. Unfortunately, we didn't get as many, stage points as we wanted, like I mentioned, but I thought we put ourselves in a really good position to come home with a good finish. We were riding, I think it was like fourth or fifth in the last lap. And unfortunately we got caught up in a wreck, but our strategy, we thought was the best one and the smart one as far as pitting midway through stage three to make that our final fuel stop of the day. And, as you saw, like every single truck pitted on that lap. So, everyone kind of just calculated that up and determined that was the best strategy and kind of made for a closer on pit road. But, that's what the calculation showed, that was going to be the best way to do it. And I think everyone kind of agreed on that for sure.
Yeah, and what really catches my eye about these like truck super speedway races, I feel like every single lap, like as a fan, it almost looks like there's going to be a big crash. Like these trucks they're wiggling around like on TV and squirreling and everything like that. Like, how's it feel in the driver's seat? Are you like managing it like crazy? Does it look as crazy it is on TV?
Yeah, 100%. It might be even more intense in person. Like, I mean, anytime you bump somebody, I mean, some people are more stable than others. I feel like the drivers with a little bit more experience can kind of handle the bumps better. Like, I was working with the 17 a lot, and he was super stable, like really easy to work with. But there was 2 or 3 trucks that I tried pushing to the front, and it was like not looking good. Like they were moving around a lot. Just seemed like, there's a pretty big bump over the tunnel in turn 3, and it seems to upset trucks. And you can kind of notice it a lot more in the truck than you can on TV. But every time I go over that bump and you hit them in the wrong angle, it just looks like we're about to wreck. So there's 9 or 10 instances where I thought we were about to cause a big one, but that never happened in a turn 3, surprisingly. But yeah, I mean, it's as crazy as it looks on TV for sure, if not more in the truck.
Yeah, and that means handling matters a lot more than people think is right. Like tuning up the truck before the race, like, and even during the race, like there are adjustments that you as a driver make, as far as your handling that maybe people don't think, because they're just like, oh, it's a super speedway, you just go out there, hold the gas and hold a pretty wheel. Like there's a lot of things that go into that, right?
Yeah, and Daytona, I feel like is a lot more handling based than Talladega nowadays. I remember my first like Daytona test in 2020 with ARCA. I know that's only a couple years ago, but it seems like Daytona just gets more wore out every year, more bumpy, and turn 4 is ruling there. So you got to be tightened up, and you get to a point where you are too tight, and it does scrub speed because you're turning so much. I think that's the only team's fears, but I'd rather have that than be like out of control, loose, and not being able to take a bump from somebody behind me. I feel like that's super important. So Talladega. Back to Talladega, I don't think it's as handling based as Daytona, but with all the tire issues that people were having, like a lot of people were cording right rears, and people were complaining about being loose. And I think the more loose trucks are having more issues with the tires. So that's another important topic. You have to be tightened up enough to where you don't destroy the right rear tire the whole time, and then being out of control. There's a lot of variables that go into super speedway racing, kind of like you mentioned, that people probably overlook.
So I want to kind of look at your truck series season this year. Obviously, you ran 14 truck races. You got 2 left in the season, being Homestead and Phoenix. And for you as a driver that's not really running anything full time this year, running trucks on a part-time basis, you ran some ARCA races. Obviously, you run a lot of late model races as well and stuff all the way around the country. But as far as just the truck series running this year, where do you feel like, do you feel like it's been a really solid year for you gaining experience? Obviously, you've got some checkered flags too, so that's obviously a great thing to get. But overall, you've gained a lot of experience and you've kind of seasoned yourself as a driver. Like, do you feel like it's definitely been a successful year?
Yeah, I think overall, when you look back at it, it's a successful year with a lot of highlights, and there's some lowlights too. To begin the year, it was very up and down. Like we wrecked at Daytona, then we won at Atlanta, then I think we wrecked the next race, and then won the next race. So it's like really severely polarizing start to the season. And as of late, disregarding this past weekend at Talladega, as of late, I feel like we've really put together good runs. I mean, I think we went on a 4 or 5 race top 10 streak. So that's definitely how you have to put yourself in position to win an owner's championship when you're in my shoes. And it was looking really good up to this past weekend. So, when you look back at it, I think you definitely have to consider these last 2 races. So I can't really put my season in a complete spectacle yet. But, I think, so far so good for sure. And I feel like my first, 4 or 5 races, as I mentioned, were a lot different than my last 4 or 5 races. So, I feel like the improvement was there, more consistent, but, I definitely like to win at least one more race to end the year to kind of just cap off the season on a good note.
Those like polarizing starts that you had, would you say that those are more like discouraging to the start of the season? Because obviously it's hard to not run consistently when you've been doing great and then the next week you don't do so well. Is that discouraging, or does that kind of inspire you to kind of come back and hit harder?
It's definitely a little discouraging to look back at, the DNFs and, the lowlights throughout the season. And then you look back at the other side of the polar opposite, and you see that, we won a couple races in between those. So, it's definitely kind of a mixed feeling for sure. I feel like I'd rather be, consistent than so polar opposite, between the races. But, you also have to consider that, NASCAR is all about winning at this point with how the chase works playoffs work. And, it's all about winning. There's so many bonus points that comes with that. And so much attention comes from winning rather than, running, second or third every week. Like I'd rather run, first one week and then 12th the next week than run second every week. I think that's just how it works in NASCAR. And maybe if it was a points straight through the year like it used to be in like the 90s and 80s, I'd rather maybe run second every week, but just the way that the points work right now, I'd definitely rather win races.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
definitely.
sure. Yeah, very important to win races for, and you mentioned the next two races that are coming up in the Truck Series schedule, Homestead and Phoenix. And I think Homestead's a really fun track. I don't think the Truck Series went there last year. Now they're back. So I think it's
Correct.
going to be a really fun race to watch. And for you, that this will be your first trip to Homestead, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I'm pretty excited for that race. I mean, I've seen, of course, all the championship races there in the past up till 2 years ago. I think they moved to Phoenix, but just the way they run the wall and kind of move around that place, it's how a lot of tracks were modeled back in the 90s and 80s. Like Atlanta Motor Speedway used to be kind of similar, but Homestead's really come to its own as a unique racetrack, and the way you move around there, run top, middle, bottom. You can make speed anywhere around that place. I feel like it's a good comparison to Kansas, and Kansas is one of my favorite racetracks. So hoping to put some similar results up. I feel like we could have finished in the top 5 in both Kansas truck races this year. So of course, Homestead's unique in its own, but I could definitely compare it to some places, and I'm really hoping it's like Kansas for sure.
Yeah, I think for sure, especially with the way the corners are and everything and the way you run it, that would be really fun to watch. And then one other point I wanted to make too before we end this little first segment here is in the Truck Series. Obviously, you're getting seasoned as a Truck Series driver, and there was this new format announced this year with like 20-minute practice sessions. Then you jump into qualifying, and I don't know if that's something that you had ever kind of done before on the short track scene before, if you had any practice in that, or this is kind of brand new to you. How's that been for you as kind of a young driver? Because a lot of people have noted young drivers or drivers coming in from other professions trying to get practice, whether how challenging it is to just you have that 20 minutes to get the truck dialed in, to get yourself dialed in as a racer. How's that been for you?
Yeah, I think a lot of it. I think a lot of it just goes back to sim for me. I think that's extremely important, and the fact that we have access to that definitely puts KBM this year at an advantage, just to be able to work weeks on the same racetrack and the same truck, same setup and everything, just dialing it in on sim. Whereas some teams don't have access to that. And sometimes it's great. Like we unload and, the 20-minute practice, we don't even need all 20 minutes. We're so close and we feel so confident in it. But, there's some tracks where we don't have access to sims, such as like IRP. That was kind of a rough one for me to just go out and get used to it. But then again, we also had an hour at IRP to dial it in. So I think NASCAR understands like the usage of sim and how much valued track time we need at certain places. Like every time we go to a new racetrack, it seems like they give us the extra time to get ready for it. And if it's like a Kansas or a Daytona or a Talladega, like we may not even get practice because we've been there so many times. So, for an organization like Cowboys Motorsports, that's, been to all these racetracks and has a long list of notes that, you can take back and really just be close right when you unload. It's not really that difficult for me because it's so close to what we do on sim. But for a brand new team that's just coming into the sport that doesn't have access, like that's got to be like grueling to get it right from the bat. Like I can't even imagine how tough that is. So that just goes to show what the experience of that team means, and all those access to resources for sure.
For sure. We'll be back here with more on Off the Record. And welcome back here on Off the Record. We're here with Corey Heim, and I wanted to jump into the next segment to talk about the ARCA Series, which you've run a good amount of ARCA this year. You've run 7 ARCA races, and obviously that's something that you started in last year and the year before, running a lot of races, getting a lot of wins as well. And so for this year, you win at Daytona once again. And obviously when you make your ARCA starts, you've been having some great success. So how is that still, while you're doing all the truck stuff that we just talked about, how is it still good for you to hop in the ARCA car and get as much track time as you can as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think ARCA is extremely beneficial for me, just to be able to kind of continue my list of notes and kind of just, supply all the information I can, like leading up to a truck race, such as Kansas, where I ran back-to-back days, ARCA and then truck. Like I feel like just kind of putting that notebook together and really just getting a good feel for it and knocking the rust off is super important. Kind of like we mentioned earlier, how little practice there are on the Truck Series, like hopping in that ARCA car, that's honestly, in my opinion, like very similar to the truck. It's super important just to get used to it and get used to the track. The temperature is a big deal in racing. I think, when you go to Kansas in the spring and then Kansas in the fall, it's 2 totally different racetracks. So ARCA is definitely, just a very good, like knock the rust off type of thing for me for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And for you as a driver who's run short tracks and late models, and now in ARCA you got seasoned with a lot of mile and a half. Truck Series you got seasoned with a mile and a half. So you think, like, I can't remember exactly which ARCA races you've run this year, but do you think it's a cool dynamic for the seasons that you did run full time? There's a big dynamic, and you guys would run on the shortest of short tracks, and you guys could run on the biggest mile and a halves, to super speedways, to road courses, to dirt tracks. We were even talking with Tony about that a few weeks ago. You think it's a great dynamic of tracks, that especially kind of when you were running full time, to race on?
Yeah, I mean, I really think there's something to be said about ARCA just being a really good, kind of building block for young drivers to really just get their foot in the water and really just start to understand how to drive a stock car rather than just being thrown to the wolves in the Truck Series. I think a lot of people talk about the lack of car count in ARCA and the lack of competition, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's always been a really good building block. I've never really seen it as like its own like individual series where, the best of the best drivers want to go there. I mean, it's never been seen like that. So, there may be less drivers and less competition, but at the same time, I mean, those are the future of racing, and they have to, learn some way. And I don't think just jumping right into the Truck Series is the right thing to do. So, I do think there are some changes that need to be made to ARCA, but at the same time, like, it's a building block, and I don't think it's right if you were to take it away. I think it would make young drivers struggle really bad just being thrown out to the Truck Series. So and you talk about the diversity of the series, like I think that's great. We go to 2 road courses, 2 dirt tracks, 5 to 6 intermediates a year, super speedways, you name it, right? And I think that's just another thing that needs to be said about just young drivers getting experience on all those different kinds of racetracks. So personally, if it wasn't for the ARCA Series, I don't think I'd be the driver I am today. Just being in all those races and getting all those laps is super important.
Do you have any like bucket list tracks that you'd like to race in either ARCA or truck or anything to like spice up the season?
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of good things about Road America. People talk really good about that place. I've really wanted to go there for a while now. Should have an opportunity to run a TA2 car there next year or something. So never been there, never seen the place, but I've heard a lot of good things for sure.
Yeah, you ran Trans Am. That was what we were talking about in Nashville, right after that gigantic hit that you took, and you were saying how you were like about to hit the road, and you ran a Trans Am car the next day. Where was that? Was that at Road America or no?
That was at Mid Ohio.
Mid Ohio,
so
that's
that
right.
was that was tough for sure. We drove right through the night, and I slept in the back of my dad's truck while my dad drove. Thankfully, he was there to drive, or else I would have been completely toast for the next day. But yeah, that's a great learning tool as well. I mean, TA2 is a road course exclusive series, and those drive pretty similar to ARCA and trucks as well. So anytime I can hop in something that gives me experience, and TA2 and ARCA is definitely 2 of the best.
Yeah, what is the dynamic? I've always been interested because I've never seen a TA2 race in person or anything like that, and I'm interested what the dynamic is when you pull up for a racing event, because there's so many different aspects to that type of racing, right? Like, what would it be explained as in like a kind of a short explanation, like train?
Yeah, I
That
mean,
type of
like,
racing.
you definitely get like a more of a road course vibe from it. Like, I
Yeah.
wouldn't say like overseas road course. It's definitely like American, road course, but at the same time, there's a little bit more like different types of class. Like, it's kind of like a wine and cheese kind of racing. You know what I mean? Like, people are just out to have fun, and then you got some guys that are really competitive. So I don't know. It's hard to explain for sure, but the fact that they go all the way to like Sonoma, and then they come back to the East Coast and run, Mid Ohio, and then run like Coda in Texas. So like, it's a national series. I mean, it's a big deal to a lot of people, and they get full fields. I mean, you're talking 30 to 50 cars per weekend, and that's on a consistent basis too. So yeah, it's super competitive. I mean, you got a really broad range of drivers, so you really get a good idea of like where you're at in the field. Whereas like if you jump right into a Truck Series road course, I mean, you're going to get 30 good drivers in that series, and I feel like TA2 is just a little bit more spread out, where you got kind of half of them are really good and half of them are just kind of there to have fun. So it's definitely a different dynamic, no doubt.
Yeah, for sure. I love seeing all the dynamic in that series for sure. And I know we just mentioned Nashville. So if you want to explain to Celia, I don't know if she saw the crash and all the viewers of Nashville, because we were talking after that race, that was a massive hit going into a very dynamic track in Nashville itself, like especially turn 3. There was like 4 trucks wadded up in that, and you were kind of just right in the middle of that sandwich, and to where it hurt pretty bad for you. Like you said, you lost your breath for a second and everything like that. It was just a big boom. Like it all happened so quick, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was no doubt the hardest hit I've ever taken in my life. And it's probably not even close. I got wadded up with Matt DiBenedetto and Grant Enfinger, and when I hit the wall, I didn't technically hit the wall. I was like sandwiching Grant Enfinger within the wall, like next to me. So I basically hit the left side of his truck as he was hitting the wall, and there's no crush point on that truck when you hit their door. Like it's just a solid, it's almost like hitting a solid concrete wall when you hit another truck. So, it's definitely a unique crash. You don't see that a lot where two trucks kind of hit the wall at the same time or hit each other into the wall. But, there's no absorption of impact, kind of like you've been seeing with the next gens. Like they're very rock solid. Like they don't absorb a lot of the impact. And I would definitely compare that to the Nashville wreck a lot. I mean, I absorbed all the impact and it went right into my rib cage. So it was, knocking me out of breath for a good like 10, 15 seconds. And definitely like was a little, scared at first, just that I broke a rib or something like that. But luckily it's just a big bruise there. And I was able to recover and run TA2 the next day.
Yeah, exactly. You took that and ran Trans Am the next day. I mean, did you feel that when you were in the car? Like, was that kind of like a lasting effect throughout the weekend, or is that something that kind of just wore off?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely super, super sore, especially with all the left and right handers and all the different G forces kind of moving you around left to right. I mean, that was tough. And then the lack of sleep was even tougher. So, definitely don't understand how people like Kyle Larson run like 4 or 5 times in a week. I mean, just that in itself, like is so tough. But, there's something to be said about, sprint car drivers and USAC guys that also run NASCAR. Like it's insane how they run, how much like 90 races per year or something, while I'm sitting here at 30, like worn out after a couple of them.
Yeah.
So definitely props to them.
Even like after an injury though, that's amazing that you were able to run the next day. Do you think it's better that you like got back into it immediately, or like if you could go back, would you maybe wait until next week to race again?
Yeah, I think the extent of the injury was just that I got the breath knocked out of me and I had a bruised rib. So like if it was something broken or I had some sort of concussion, like definitely have to sit out for any kind of head injury or head trauma. You see a lot of next gen, NASCAR drivers sitting out recently just because of that. And it's super important that you make that a priority. But, as long as you're evaluated and kind of understood that it's nothing, detrimental if you were to re-injure it. Like if I hit my rib again, like it would hurt really bad, but there's no lasting effects to that. So it's just really dependent on the injury. And I think, head injuries are the number one priority that you need to kind of focus on. And I've really begun to understand that this year. Like before this year, I never really understood head injuries or how any of that worked, but definitely taking a couple of hard hits this year where it's definitely become a priority for me for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely a big priority. And I know, real quick, you mentioned dirt racing too. How much? Because I know you ran DeCoin this year for ARCA, right? You ran that dirt
Yeah,
race.
I've run DeCoin and I also ran 4 micro races at Millbridge. So definitely got my fair share of dirt racing, and it's a different world for sure.
Yeah, you feel like you're getting seasoned into it pretty decently, or you think there's still some work to be done there?
Yeah, I mean, like it seems like I can qualify really good, but I can never race really good in the Millbridge deal. I qualified, I think top 5 in 3 out of my 4 races that I did out of like the 30 or 40 cars there. And you're super satisfied with that, and then you have an invert that like puts you back to like 4th in a heat race. So that's a little bit different than NASCAR. There's no inverts or anything like that. And starting from the middle of the pack and kind of like a hornet's nest is what I'd call it. Just so many moving pieces and slide jobs and people dooring each other, like so many different pieces versus a NASCAR race. It's a little bit more calm, I feel like. That was definitely something that caught me off guard, but I don't regret doing it one bit. It was fun while it lasted, but definitely a different world.
Yeah, and that's funny because I feel like I remember when we had Mason Diaz on this show like a month ago. I think that's the exact same thing he said when I asked him about dirt racing, because he was just trying it out and he was like, "Man, I could run a heater, I could sit on the pole, but when we get to the race, I have no idea what to do." And so it's like it's a huge different challenge, like you said, right, within the race as far as to just running a lap.
Yeah, and like the other thing that's like a lot different that I noticed about dirt racing, I mean, of course it's more of a local, sport. I mean, Millbridge is right down the road to me. It's about 30 minutes out. So you don't have to fly anywhere. You just kind of show up and race. And the other thing is like NASCAR races are like spread out all throughout the day. Like generally we practice at like 10:30 a.m., 11 o'clock a.m., qualify like 4:30, race at 7. Millbridge, you show up at 5 o'clock p.m., you practice at 5:30, qualify at 6, race at probably 7 or 7:30. So it's like a 3-hour span where you just get after it for 3 hours and then go home. And, you run probably, 1/20th of the laps you would as in a NASCAR race. I mean, the feature is 30 laps at Millbridge, whereas a NASCAR race, you're generally running anywhere between 100 to 200 laps in a truck race. So you're running a quarter of the laps, when it's all said and done. But like, I feel just as worn out just because of how fast you progress through the night. And that's pretty much all dirt racing all around the US. I mean, you show up, practice, qualify, race, just done, done, and done. And NASCAR is really spread out. So definitely a different way of looking at it, different way of approaching it.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll be back here with more on Off the Record. And welcome back here on Off the Record. Glad to have Corey with us here still. And we're going to jump into some other racing here. We're going to talk about some late model racing, short tracks, a lot of the stuff that obviously you grew up with and kind of seasoned yourself as a race car driver moving to NASCAR. And we'll kind of start with, one of the biggest late model races of the year at Martinsville. You ran it in your, the famed number 78 that you're always in on the late models side. And like you said, it was an all right race. You said you finished around the 9th place.
That's correct. Yeah. Martinsville has always been a big deal for me. Ever since I ran it for my first start in a late model stock, finished second. Felt like I really should have won the race. And that was like kind of what lit the fire for me as far as trying to get a Martinsville clock. And I've been there in a truck once now, and should have had a pretty good run there. So it feels like I've had the speed to win a Martinsville clock before, but I've never really been able to just finish it out, finish the deal. And, I've led a lot of laps, but that's not what brings the clock home. So Martinsville late model stock race, you never really know what you're going to get with that one. Some years it's a clean race where it goes pretty much green to checkered other than the stage breaks, but some years it's just a complete catastrophe. So, Martinsville is definitely unique. I feel like it's one of the most challenging short tracks I've ever been to. Just super hard on brakes, super hard on equipment. There in Bristol are definitely the two toughest that I've been to.
And I want to talk about North Wilkesboro. Obviously, you got the chance to run the North Wilkesboro race. A lot of people came out to run that race, like Dale Jr. I know Stephen Parsons was running that race as well. A lot of familiar faces, and a lot of faces, obviously, in the car store that were able to run that race, like Mason Diaz. We talked to him the week before. So first of all, just kind of summarize that event. As now it feels like that was the event that really almost took off the place. Like, all right, then boom, right after that, then it's the All-Star race is announced. Truck Series is heading there next year, and obviously that was kind of the culmination of the big month that the Speedway had. So kind of summarize that event. How was that for you, just being there, especially being young as well, and seeing that track kind of be brought back to life?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, like, that place blew my expectations out of the water. Like, just the spectacle around that place, how many people were there, how many people were in the pits outside of the racetrack, and even camping for a one-day show. Like, it was insane how many people were there and the support that it got. Going into that race, I didn't really know what to expect because I never really grew up racing there. I'd never really seen the place other than like iRacing, which of course isn't, anything near what it was in real life. But just to see all the people there was insane. Just all the cheering and stuff for Dale Jr. and all the cheering for all the car store drivers was really cool to see. And even though we didn't have the race that we wanted there, I think it was just an awesome thing to be a part of. And maybe look back one day and say like, yeah, like I was the first first major race back, I should say, at North Wilkesboro when they finally brought the place back. So just to be there was super special.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good point. You can say you were a part of the race that almost seemed like it kind of brought that place back to life. And you mentioned, seeing all the car store drivers and see Dale Jr. That was still like your third or fourth car store race of the year, right? Because you've run some before that.
Yeah, I think that was my fourth. Yeah, I think you're right, about third or fourth car store race of the year. And then I ran some NASCAR events too. Really just any kind of off weekend that I can, pick and choose to get that experience is definitely crucial for me.
For sure. And I know the North Wilkesboro race, it was a lot of managing tires, right? Because I know we talked to a few people in the race and they were saying how they were going to take that practice session to just see what the tire wear was. Because there was a few practice sessions and then there's qualifying. Didn't qualifying get like rained out and then you guys did it at like midnight or something like that?
No, we qualified, and the tire part of it really surprised me. Like, going into that race, everyone said that we were going to be like saving, like, it was Myrtle Beach Speedway, which is one, like, by far the most abrasive track that I've ever been to. I mean, we literally rode around 40 miles an hour saving tires until like 10 laps to go. I mean, it was insane how much you had to save there. And a lot of people thought it was going to be pretty similar, but in practice, like there was definitely tire wear, don't get me wrong, but I would compare it to somewhere like Pensacola, Five Flags. Like it's not terrible, but it's definitely there. And in the race, like there really wasn't a whole lot of saving. I think the driver who did it the best was Dale Jr., which was pretty surprising because he doesn't do much late model racing at all. But you saw some people kind of come from the back and go to the front at the very end, but really the person who won the race led the whole thing. So if you compare it to Myrtle Beach, kind of like I mentioned earlier, like the person who leads the first 80 laps absolutely never won the race there. Never, ever. They'd finish 5th or 6th every time because they just burned up the most of their tires. So, as I mentioned, like a lot of people thought it was going to be similar to that, but it wasn't. It wasn't as bad as people thought it was. So I think that's what really led to them not tearing the place down and repaving it. And that's why they're going to use the same, surface for the All-Star race next year.
Yeah, that sounds like me and iRacing. I'll whenever I race in iRacing, I'll rip to the front. I'll feel like the king of the world, whether it's at Atlanta or at a short track, and then 15 to go, and I finish 7th because everyone's driving by me, and so it sucks. And that I mean, saving time. It's kind of like, do you feel like the people that drive to the front, like you said, when you raced at Myrtle Beach, and there are people that led, the first part of the race? I mean, are they doing that on purpose? Are they trying to just get out there to lead laps and trying to get the I wouldn't say like TV time, because I don't know how much races were like aired on TV, or are they just kind of like forgetting, or is everybody saving more tires than them? Like, what's the dynamic there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of variables there. Like some people, just kind of lack the experience to know that your good place to ride is going to be 5th to 6th place if you can, and then kind of just go for it at the end. And some of it, people are just kind of oblivious to the fact that you have to save tires. Like, I mean, you got guys that literally try to lap the field in the first like 50 laps of a Myrtle Beach race, and they will end up 3 laps down by the time it's said and done. Like it's insane how like so oblivious people are, to how much you have to save tires in a short track. But when you got guys that locally run it like Dominion or South Boston, which are fresh repaved tracks that you don't have to save any tires, like some people just don't know how to save tires, and all they know is go, go, go. So when you go to a place like Myrtle Beach, or I guess North Wilkesboro, Pensacola, where you have to save some tire, it's definitely a learning curve. And I feel like the Hoosier tire and the late model stuff definitely does a good job at just having a really solid progression of, a lot of grip when you have fresh tires to like no grip when you wear them out. So I feel like the Hoosier tire definitely does a good job as far as that goes. And it definitely makes for a good race.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely love to see good racing like that. And I was going to ask you what one of your favorite short tracks was, and that did remind me because of I think the last time we talked on like a show like a year ago, I remember us talking about a track called Winchester for a while, and that race is coming up. I can't remember how soon it is. I can't remember the exact date. I saw it today. But I know we talked about Winchester a lot. I know you love Winchester. I know a lot of people love Winchester. I love Winchester. I've never been there, but I want to go. But unfortunately, I've been able to see races, whether on stream or on TV, whether it was ARCA, whether it was late models. Kind of explain to everybody what the cool dynamic is about Winchester, why is it so fun? Why is it such a cool racetrack?
Yeah, I mean, Winchester's badass. I mean, like a year later, it is still my favorite racetrack. It's just a really high bank track. It's worn out. It's not really that rough. I feel like, the sister track to Winchester, which is Salem, is definitely worn out. Like it's in need of a repave pad, but for whatever reason, Winchester stuck in there. I think they were paved at fairly similar times in a time frame, but I don't know. I mean, that place is fast. You run up by the wall in 3 and 4. You can run on the bottom, in the middle. A lot of different multi-groove racetracks, kind of like I touched on earlier, like the whole Kansas and Homestead dynamic. Like I really like racing around tracks like that, where you just constantly search for grip, and a lot of rubber gets laid down, so it makes for a slick racetrack when it's all said and done. So you're almost wide open there in qualifying too, which I think is pretty cool. So I've always loved going there, and the race is actually not this weekend but next weekend. So I'll be there in a Jet Motorsports Super Late Model. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. So is that going to be on Homestead weekend?
No, that's the weekend before Homestead.
Okay.
Yep.
So you'll be free. You won't have to pull double duty and drive and sleep in the back of the car on the way there. So that's cool. You said it's wide open during qualifying for the late models?
Just about, yeah. I qualified on the pole there last year, and it was like you crack the gas and it's right back to it. And the track's only, I want to say it's a half a mile. Yeah, it's a half mile racetrack, and you are just barely out of the gas. So I feel like your top speed's actually higher than Bristol. And, their corner speed might be a little bit higher too, even without the PJ1. So for whatever reason, that place is worn out, but it still just has a ton of grip. So it makes for a really fun race.
Yeah. Do you think that's a place that could host a truck race like in the future? Like if they like
Yeah,
even added some stuff, like I don't know what the whole like the seating is like there, like the area, but like I know the track's really cool. So I say we renovate it and
right.
we bring some, we bring some truck racing in, even some Xfinity racing. I think that'd be pretty cool because I mean they run ARCA there, so it's like they kind of have a taste of it. So I feel like, hey, let's bring the truck series there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of variables that go into that. I think the track itself absolutely can host a truck race. I think that would be a great race. If you put 40 trucks in that place, I don't know what would happen, but it would be a great race when it's all said and done. But when you look at it as far as the market goes, I mean, NASCAR is just one big market, right? I mean, they're going to go to, big cities. That's why they're doing the Chicago street race instead of Road America next year. That's why they go to Daytona. That's why they go to Phoenix. That's why they go to Charlotte, all these big cities. It's a big market. It's going to attract people. And when people read the headlines for it, people are going to watch it. And I think that's the only reason why North Wilkesboro got another date is because people look at North Wilkesboro like, oh my God, like it's an old NASCAR track. Like used to love that kind of racing. So people will watch the race. Yeah. When people see Winchester, like, yes, there will be a group of people that look at it and be like, oh man, like Winchester's always been a badass late model track. They used to race, I think Xfinity or I guess back in the day, Winston Cup there a long time ago. But it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. Winchester is not a well-known city. It's not really by a big city at all. Hotel situation's a little rough, even for the late model weekends. So it would be really, really hard to host anything but ARCA there. I feel like they could maybe get away with doing trucks if they somehow found a way to get people in hotels or campers or something. But it's just tough. Like there's so many different variables outside of the actual racetrack that make it tough. And I see a lot of people on like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter talking about, oh man, like if NASCAR came to this short track, like it'd be so cool. Like, and they're totally right. But like the variables outside of that track are just limiting so much of what it could be if you just went to a big city that just made everyone's life so much easier. So it does suck, but like, and I would love to race there in a truck series, but I doubt it'll happen, unfortunately.
Are there any other tracks in like the ARCA circuit that you'd like to run in truck or you think might be making a push towards running in kind of the bigger leagues?
Yeah, that's a good question.
We did get Milwaukee. That's good.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm not a big Milwaukee fan. But, you're not. Yeah, Milwaukee's all right. I mean, I was going to bring that up, as part of the, ones that I'm kind of surprised we're going to. I mean, it is a city and it's a well-known city. I mean, they have like a professional baseball team. So, they have some sort of, attraction there for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely capable of hosting Truck Series races. And I think that's one that, definitely is capable of doing that and maybe, progressing towards Xfinity and Cup. And, it's not a bad racetrack. I just think that's one of the places that are well capable of hosting a race, but like maybe the on-track product won't be that great. So we'll see. I could be totally wrong. I've been there once in ARCA and it was kind of just, it's really hard to pass. Like it's really worn out, which is fine. But when you can't pass, it kind of makes for a drag of a race. So we'll see. I could be totally wrong. But yeah, I'll be the first one to find out, I guess.
Exactly. We'll be back here to wrap it up here and Off the Record. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Off the Record. I'm still RJ Starsvik. I'm still here with my co-host Celia Ryan, and we're still here with Corey Heim here to wrap up the show. So, we kind of like to wrap up the show talking about the future. And I know a question that I always say my old co-host on the drivers meeting, Tommy Joe Martins, used to ask a lot of people is he used to always just ask, especially for young drivers, like in the next, let's say, 5-ish, 6, 7 years. Obviously it's, it's hard to predict that much in the future, but say just ideally, where do you want, Corey Heim to be, say, in that future, where when people hear the name Corey Heim, what do you want people to think?
Yeah, I mean, I think my future goals are just to be a successful racer. I race to win every week, and I don't want to be in a position where I'm having to prove myself in a lesser equipment car and, kind of just having to fight for my career, every week. Like I hope I don't have to ever be in that position. And luckily to this point, I've never had to be in that position, but that's part of racing. But my goal is definitely to be just a successful race car driver, wherever that may be. And, of course the goal is the Cup Series, but as long as I'm successful and content with what I'm racing and what I'm doing, and I can make a living off of it, I'd be really happy with that. And, I definitely want to have a good reputation to come with that. I feel like, to this point, I've been a pretty low key driver. Like I don't make a big deal out of myself. And a lot of drivers have made their reputation out of that, which is totally fine, but it's really just not me. Like I like to let my racing do the talking, and, definitely try to have, some personality with it. But at the end of the day, like I'm a racer, like that's just what I enjoy doing. And I'm not, maybe not the big personality that a lot of people seek after as far as like having a favorite driver or something. But, we'll see. I mean, it's, 3 years ago today, like I would have no idea that I would get to this point in my career where I've got 2 Truck Series win in my rookie year. And like, to look back at it 3 years ago, like I would have never guessed that I had made it this far. So, the future is definitely not clear for me. I'm trying to clear that up for next year and do it day by day for the next coming years, excuse me. But, I really hope to be a successful race car driver, and I don't know, what'll end up happening. And I don't know what my odds are for that, but, like I said, 3 years ago, I had no idea I'd make it this far. So hopefully in 3 years, I can look back and kind of say the same thing.
Yeah. And looking like more short term, obviously. How about next year? What are your plans? What are you excited to do?
Yeah, I will be with Toyota Racing next year. I'm not exactly sure where I'll be yet, but we're working on that. I'm actually about to have a meeting about that in a few minutes here. So, definitely a little nervous about how everything's going to play out. Just with KBM going to Chevy and me sticking with Toyota, I'm not really quite sure where that leaves me yet, but we'll definitely have an announcement within the next couple months.
Awesome. Excited to hear that. And so, yeah, because I'm that was my next question, because I'm a big Xfinity Series guy. I love the Xfinity Series. I love the way those cars race, and I feel like you'd be a perfect fit. Like if you were to just get a race next year, is that something on your bucket list, like next year to make your Xfinity Series debut at some point?
It's definitely on my radar. Honestly, I have no idea what's going to happen next year.
Yeah.
But if I had the opportunity, I'm definitely not going to turn it down.
If it comes up,
you
you'd take it.
So, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I turn that offer down. So just working on, some truck stuff for next year and kind of seeing where all that lies. But, Xfinity debut is definitely on my radar, and we'll see what happens.
Awesome, man. And I know, just to wrap it up, we're looking towards the next 2 races, the Truck Series season. That's what you got. And as far as the rest of the year, yeah, you got Winchester, you got the remaining 2 truck races on the schedules, or anything outside of that for people to know that what you'll be racing as far as just anything around the country?
Yeah, I'll be doing 2 more super late model races on top of the one at Winchester next week. I'll be doing the All-American 400 in Nashville, and I'll be doing the Snowball Derby as well. So not sure about Speedfest. I always race my home track in Cordele, Georgia. Speedfest in January, I'm not sure if I'll be doing that one, but as far as like the beginning of next year, I definitely want to stay ready for Daytona, and just kind of definitely knock the rust off, after the month or so off that I'm inevitably going to get at some point. So definitely looking forward to the next couple of races. I've always looked forward to the end of the year, because I feel like the best races always come at the end of the year, like the Derby, Winchester. I like Nashville, Phoenix. I've always loved going to Phoenix. So super excited for the next couple for sure.
Awesome. Going to be fun to watch. So thanks again for Corey Heim for joining us on the show, and we will see you all on Off the Record next week.